I lowered myself onto the chair, my fork hovering over the plate without touching it. Michael leaned in his voice, sharp and deliberate. "Don't touch anything." The words landed like ice, and I felt a tension coil tight around my chest. My eyes flicked across the table, catching the edge of something tucked under the tablecloth. A neat stack of papers peeked out, only partially concealed, but enough to make the gut tighten. Hands folded in my lap, I tried to maintain a calm posture. My mind, however, was spinning. Why would he warn me like that? Why hide documents under the cloth at a dinner meant to celebrate? The gesture didn't make sense, and yet the instinct gnawed at me, whispering that nothing here was as it seemed. Michael's gaze skimmed over me, a faint smirk at the corner of his mouth, as if he had already won some silent victory. The family chattered around us, laughter and clinking glasses, but I heard none of it. Every smile and casual remark seemed layered a mask covering the edges of something brittle and dangerous. I shifted slightly in the chair, trying to glance again at the folded stack. The papers were crisp, new, almost deliberate in the way they were arranged. My pulse picked up, though I didn't move toward them. Instead, I studied the way Michael's hands rested on the table, how carefully he positioned himself between the stack and me. Each gesture was measured, and that precision only deepened the suspicion. The warmth from the candles did nothing to soften the atmosphere. A flicker of light danced across the edge of the documents, and I realized I was staring too long. Thoughts tumbled in my head. Legal forms, investment statements, signatures, perhaps forged intentions. Hidden. I had no proof yet, only the sense that something fundamental had shifted, and that a line had already been crossed. I caught a glimpse of my wife glancing toward me, her smile a fraction too tight, her eyes questioning without words. The tension was not mine alone. It had stretched across the table, threading through quiet glances, and the way forks hovered over untouched food. Michael straightened, his expression neutral, now as though nothing had happened. I forced a nod, masking the churn of suspicion and worry roiling beneath. My mind ran through possibilities, weighing actions against the consequences. Confronting him here could blow up everything, yet doing nothing felt like surrendering some invisible ground. The conversation around us continued mundane topics about work and weather, but every sentence carried an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. I realized that the simple act of sitting down for dinner had become a battlefield, subtle, but unforgiving. With deliberate slowness, I let my hand brush near the papers, careful not to disturb them, only to confirm what I had already suspected. They were there. They existed. The evidence, the plan, whatever Michael had set in motion was real. I waited until everyone had cleared from the dining room before reaching under the tablecloth. The stack of papers felt heavier than expected in my hands. I snapped a few photos with my phone, careful not to disturb anything. The signatures were familiar, yet something was off. Each line, each curve betrayed a hand that was trying to imitate mine, not the hand that had actually signed years ago. Anger surged first. Then came the disappointment, settling like a weight across my chest. How could Michael, my own son, plan something like this? Betrayal had never been a word I associated with him yet. The evidence whispered a different truth. Every rational thought collided with a personal disbelief that left me shaky, forcing me to sit down at the kitchen counter and stare at the images. The draft documents were worse than I had feared. Ownership of our family investments was being reassigned my name on the lines, but my consent nowhere. A new will had been drafted, one that made Michael the primary heir to everything. The precision of the forgery was unsettling. Whoever had assisted him had known exactly how to make it look legitimate. Shuffling through the photos, I noted discrepancies in ink density dates that didn't align with my calendar, and formatting changes only someone familiar with my previous filings could replicate. My hands trembled as I marked each anomaly with notes writing in the margins to track patterns. Every page confirmed a deliberate plan, a premeditated attempt to overtake my decisions and control what I had spent decades building. Voices drifted from the other rooms, laughter and conversation, but I couldn't hear it. Every noise was a reminder that the household had become a stage, and I was performing the part of the unaware parent while evidence sat under my own eyes. Even my wife sitting nearby seemed slightly distracted, exchanging subtle looks with other family members. Suspicion was starting to ripple outward, although no one had said anything outright. I reached for my phone and dialed Elena Cruz, my old friend and former investigator. Her calm voice answered after a few rings. "Robert, everything okay?" she asked, but I could tell she sensed urgency. "Not really," I said, showing her the first photo. "Look at this. This isn't right." She paused, then leaned into her professional instinct. "Send me everything," she said. "Let's go through it line by line. You need to know exactly what you're facing before you do anything." Elena's voice steadied me more than I expected. Her presence reminded me that logic could still guide me even when trust had been broken. We scheduled a time to meet later that evening to review the documents in detail. In the meantime, I had to keep my composure, especially with Michael still nearby, oblivious or deliberately pretending. I returned to the photos, comparing each signature carefully to ones I had on file. The differences were subtle, small tremors in the strokes, but deliberate enough that no ordinary hand could replicate them so consistently. Whoever had done this had studied my habits, understood the flow of my pen. Fear and frustration intertwined as I considered the possibility of complicity from someone within our inner circle. Minutes stretched as I analyzed every line. Each comparison seemed to reveal more than the last. Michael's audacity had no bounds, but the realization that he might not have acted alone made the situation even more dangerous. A legal professional had likely helped him orchestrate the transfer, someone with access to our accounts and familiarity with our estate. I noted every suspicious detail, every irregularity and typed observations in a separate document. The methodical work calmed a portion of the storm inside me, giving me something concrete to focus on beyond shock and anger. Still, the questions lingered. Why now? Why risk everything at once? And how had the people I trusted enabled this? I glanced at the stack again. Its presence in our home, hidden under a tablecloth during a family dinner, felt deliberate. Michael had wanted me to find it eventually, but only after the initial shock had settled in to give him leverage over my reactions. That calculation stung more than the act itself. By the time I moved to my office, the documents were open across the desk phone at my side, notes scattered. I organized the images, flagged each one for discussion with Elena, and mapped out preliminary questions. Every detail mattered: dates, signatures, document formatting, even the choice of paper. The more I reviewed, the clearer the pattern became. A plan was underway, one that threatened not just my financial security, but the trust that had defined our family for years. Despite the anger, despite the sense of betrayal, I knew rushing in recklessly could destroy any chance of reclaiming control. Hours passed as I examined each page, marking and cross-referencing, building a map of what had been attempted and what might yet be concealed. Michael's casual demeanor at dinner contrasted sharply with the careful orchestration revealed in front of me now. Every move he made had been calculated, every detail intended to catch me off guard. As night deepened, I leaned back, rubbing my eyes and taking a deep breath. The stack of papers waited silently, its presence a constant reminder of the choices I had to make next. I couldn't act hastily, yet doing nothing was no longer an option. My thoughts circled strategies, forming slowly until a plan began to take shape. The notification pinged just as I was reviewing the documents again. An email from our law firm had arrived, and the sender was familiar in the wrong way. Opening it, I froze. The message wasn't intended for me, that was obvious immediately. Lines of text outlined steps taken to adjust account ownership and suggested ways to secure Michael's position. Notes in the margin referenced signatures, dates, and bank authorizations, all pointing to collaboration I hadn't suspected until now. A chill ran through me. How had someone I trusted so completely, someone who had advised me for years, slipped into this? The calculations, the planning. It wasn't just my son acting alone. Whoever had sent this had made a mistake, revealing the network of assistants behind the attempt to take over what I had built. I reread the email several times, tracing each instruction, and highlighted point, trying to confirm that what I was seeing was real. Questions collided with anger. Did they really think I wouldn't notice? Did Michael know, or was the law firm orchestrating quietly while he played his part? The idea that my own professional counsel had crossed a line hit harder than anything Michael could do by himself. I considered ignoring it, stepping back, pretending I hadn't seen it, but my conscience refused. Letting it slide would only make everything worse. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. Elena's voice cut through, sharply professional, but concerned. "You found something?" she asked. "Yes," I said, holding back the tremor in my voice. "And it's bigger than I imagined. The lawyer, they're involved." She exhaled, not audibly, but the pause carried meaning. "Okay, keep everything. Don't delete, don't alter. I want copies every email attachment note. We'll track everything carefully before confronting anyone." Her guidance steadied my racing mind. The logic, the methodical steps she laid out, pulled me from the edge of panic. Writing down what I knew and organizing proof became my immediate priority. Michael's looming presence, the subtle threats, and his casual disregard had started to weigh heavily, but focusing on facts gave me direction. Later that evening, Michael wandered into the room, casually leaning against the doorframe. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and I caught a hint of impatience in the curve of his jaw. "Thinking about that stack of papers again?" he asked, voice deliberately light, almost teasing. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a folder on my laptop, scrolling through the photos, comparing signatures, noting anomalies. The air between us thickened, not with words, but with an unspoken challenge. He shifted his weight, narrowing the gap with a casual step, eyes sharp. "You're making it harder than it needs to be," he said, almost mocking. "You can stop pretending you care about all that paperwork." A surge of irritation hit, but I swallowed it, keeping my expression steady. Reacting would give him control. Instead, I jotted down observations, cross-referenced account numbers, and marked suspicious actions that aligned with the accidental email from the lawyer. Each line confirmed what I feared. Michael was counting on my restraint, assuming I would hesitate. Elena called again, her voice firm and calm. "Robert, you need to catalog everything immediately. Photos, emails, notes, any detail could matter. You're not alone in this, but you need evidence first, clarity second." Her advice reminded me that action didn't require confrontation right away. Patience wasn't weakness, it was strategy. The documents on the desk, the accidental email, even Michael's provocations, they were all part of the map I needed to reclaim control. I paused, rubbing the bridge of my nose, feeling the tension of days compressing into hours. Self-doubt threatened had I misjudged signals, overlooked subtle signs, allowed trust to be weaponized. Still, the proof lay before me. That was undeniable. And with Elena guiding the next steps, I had a plan to move carefully, without letting fear dictate the outcome. Michael's presence remained a constant, subtle pressure. He moved around the office, flipping casually through a magazine, occasionally glancing my way. Each time the reminder hit that he believed he held the advantage. He wasn't overtly aggressive yet, but the way he carried himself, the confidence in his posture, made clear he assumed I was uncertain, cornered. I returned to the email, tracing each instruction line by line. There were small gaps, moments where human error surfaced, and those became clues. Each inconsistency added to the picture of coordination between him and someone I had considered trustworthy. Elena had been right. Careful documentation now would define any advantage later. Hours passed. Notes and images accumulated, lists of irregularities taking shape. The office quieted as the night deepened, leaving only the hum of the computer and the occasional click of the keyboard. Michael finally left the room, still smiling, faintly, unaware of the extent to which I had already started to piece together the scope of the betrayal. I leaned back, eyes scanning the spreadsheets and photographs sprawled across the desk. Nothing had been acted upon yet. Everything remained potential leverage, a ledger of planning and deceit. My next steps had to be deliberate enough to reclaim what was mine without tipping my hand prematurely. Elena's words echoed, "Record everything, Robert. Every detail counts. One misstep now, and you lose the narrative." With a long breath, I set the phone beside the laptop, fingers hovering over the notes. The first proof was in my hands, a thread connecting Michael to someone I had trusted. Following it carefully could unravel the plan, or at least expose the foundation of the betrayal. The call from the bank came just as I was arranging the documents on my desk. Michael had begun the process of transferring part of our family investments into his name. I listened to the confirmation on speakerphone, and each word dug into me deeper than any confrontation could. He moved deliberately, following the steps that had been outlined in the forged drafts and the accidental email. Each signature, each authorization was accounted for, leaving me observing without the ability to intervene immediately. The bank representative spoke with formality, unaware that I was sitting in the next room, absorbing the full scope of what was unfolding. A rush of frustration came first, sharp and stinging. It was followed by a hollow, gnawing recognition my silence over the years had allowed this to happen. I had hoped patience, restraint, and calm would protect the family, but those same habits had created the space Michael needed to act. The realization burned quietly, threading through my thoughts as I documented the sequence of transfers in meticulous detail. Michael's confidence was tangible even across the phone line. He spoke casually, assuming I was only a passive observer, and each tone carried an edge, a subtle reminder of control. He relied on my hesitation, knowing that confrontation might delay the process, but he underestimated how closely I was following every move. The lawyer involved also played their role with precision. Calls arrived with instructions, clarifications, and assurances, and it became clear that this was a coordinated effort. The pattern emerged gradually, the pieces fitting together in a way that left little room for error on their part, yet also gave me insight into how to dismantle it later. I glanced at the records in front of me, tracing the chain of events, noting timestamps, and comparing them with the documentation from previous weeks. Each inconsistency revealed a calculated sequence meant to appear routine, yet the underlying intention was unmistakable. Michael and the lawyer had assumed that a structured process would mask the deception, but every anomaly provided an opening for scrutiny. Internal conflict surged. Anger battled with disbelief, frustration with a reluctant sense of strategy. Years of measured patience now seemed like a vulnerability, but recognizing that allowed me to shift focus toward reclaiming control. Moving carefully was the only option. Reacting impulsively could jeopardize the evidence I had begun to gather. I set up a separate folder on my laptop, logging every transaction, every email, and every phone call. Notes filled the margins as patterns became clearer. Each piece of information was a step toward understanding not just the action Michael had taken, but the broader design that had enabled it. Observing the process unfold, I kept my hands away from the keyboard, resisting the urge to intervene prematurely. The pressure wasn't only external. Family members had started to notice subtle changes in Michael's behavior and the lawyer's insistence. Questions surfaced, half-formed glances exchanged at the dinner table, murmurs that suggested awareness, but not confrontation. Each small hint reinforced that the tension had begun to ripple beyond just the three of us. I leaned back, rubbing my temples, weighing each option. Every moment that passed with the transfer in motion increased the stakes. I realized that the pattern of past restraint, the hope that patience and silence would preserve stability, had left me at a disadvantage. But awareness now created an opportunity to redirect, to move deliberately, rather than react out of impulse. Michael called again, checking the status of a particular asset. His tone was sharp, assertive, and it reminded me that every hesitation on my part was being monitored. The lawyer reinforced his confidence, citing policies and steps giving the impression of inevitability. Each word reminded me of the calculated nature of their actions and the urgency of establishing my own strategy. I opened a spreadsheet, cross-referencing account dates and signatures. Anomalies surfaced, minor, but telling timestamps that didn't align, authorization numbers inconsistent with the records. I had small discrepancies that revealed the attempt wasn't flawless. Those gaps became my foothold, my means to eventually reclaim authority and control. Thoughts drifted to Elena. I needed her insight to ensure nothing was overlooked. Her advice would be crucial for identifying the key points of intervention, making sure that when the time came to act, I wouldn't be caught off guard. Her guidance had always provided a rational counterpoint to the whirlwind of emotion, and now more than ever, I needed that perspective. The hours slipped by as I monitored the transfers, documented everything meticulously, and made mental notes of possible courses of action. Michael remained unaware of how closely I followed each step, confident that the momentum was entirely in his favor. I couldn't let that confidence translate into triumph. By the time the transfers were nearly complete, a sense of urgency pressed down. The reality of the loss, the tangible movement of assets, made it impossible to remain passive any longer. Decisions had to be made, steps calculated, and a plan prepared for immediate execution. Sitting across from Michael at the restaurant, I felt the weight of every transaction he had set in motion pressing down. He spoke casually, leaning back in his chair, as if the money and property weren't mine at all. The lawyer's instructions lingered in my head, each one a reminder that this was coordinated, deliberate, and calculated to corner me. "Everything's proceeding smoothly," Michael said, tapping a menu with a subtle force. "I thought you'd be more involved?" I kept my expression neutral, letting the words slide over me. Reacting too quickly would give him an advantage. My mind raced through emails, phone calls, and notes I had gathered. Every irregularity mattered, every timestamp or misplaced reference was a clue I could use later. Observation was my weapon for now. Patience, my shield. He smiled, a faint arrogance creeping into his posture. "Don't worry, Dad. The transfers are almost complete. You're still technically in control, but—" His voice trailed purposefully, leaving the threat hanging. The irritation flared but didn't erupt. Containment was crucial. I shifted slightly, scanning his gestures, the subtle adjustments of his hands, the way he glanced around the room. Everything about him screamed confidence in his own plan, yet that same confidence revealed cracks. Calculated as it was, he underestimated how meticulously I had tracked each detail. The lawyer had been precise, too precise, leaving traces in emails that suggested a hand guiding Michael at every step. Calls I'd recorded and messages saved in folders began to form a clear sequence. Each step they had taken could be documented, traced, and later used to reclaim control. The realization fueled a controlled resolve. The moment to act was approaching, and I had to be ready. Michael's tone shifted when a waiter approached, but his eyes never left mine. The subtle attempt to unsettle me, to make me second-guess my next move, was apparent. The threat was layered: financial, familial, psychological. Every choice I made felt scrutinized, every pause noted. Yet, in that observation, a plan started forming, connecting the evidence I had gathered into a coherent strategy. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension roll off in a way that would not betray my internal calculations. "We'll review the numbers together next week," I said, voice even controlled. "I want to make sure everything is accurate." A pause followed. Michael's gaze flickered briefly, registering the firmness in my tone. His posture remained relaxed, but I could tell the comment had unsettled him. He hadn't expected a counter, even a subtle one, at this stage. While he took a sip of water, my mind catalogued everything: every transfer attempt, each document, the accidental email revealing the lawyer's complicity. Patterns emerged that hadn't been obvious at first glance. The proof wasn't complete, but it was growing stronger with each observation, each note I made. The restaurant hummed with other diners, yet every sound seemed secondary, irrelevant. Michael's confidence in a public space revealed the audacity of his plan. He assumed I would be intimidated by setting the confrontation where others could see. The calculation was transparent to me, and I noted it carefully. As the conversation drifted toward neutral topics, I didn't speak much. Attention remained focused, recording mental notes: when he laughed, when he glanced at his phone, subtle signs of impatience. Each movement was a thread to pull when the time came. Every detail mattered in constructing a response that would reclaim not just control, but the authority that had been undermined over the past weeks. Elena's words echoed in my head, her voice a reminder of method and precision. Document everything. Every interaction counts. Don't let emotion dictate action. Following her guidance, I silently logged Michael's behaviors and statements, ensuring that the pressure he applied would be mirrored by the weight of evidence I was collecting. Minutes stretched as we sat, and I kept each interaction under careful scrutiny. The tension thickened with every remark, every glance that carried meaning beyond words. Michael attempted to assert dominance, relying on my hesitation to maintain the illusion of control, but each small oversight he made strengthened my understanding of his plan. By the time dessert arrived, I had compiled a mental dossier: every misstep, every irregularity, every piece of corroborating evidence. His casual confidence now clashed with the internal map I had drawn, the architecture of his plan visible in a way he had not intended. The pressure was unrelenting, yet it served a purpose. It forced me to recognize vulnerabilities, to anticipate reactions, and to prepare a precise counter. My calm exterior masked a mind racing with strategy, assembling the elements necessary to reclaim control when the moment was right. Michael leaned back, smiling faintly, thinking he had pushed me to the edge. I allowed the perception, letting him assume dominance for the moment. Each measured pause, every subtle acknowledgement of his moves, became part of the groundwork for the inevitable shift. As the waiter cleared plates, I shifted slightly in my chair, fingers drumming lightly on the table. The conversation had ended for now, but the tension remained unresolved. Every decision, every recorded detail, and every mental note would converge soon, and the advantage would swing. The email popped up unexpectedly, the sender's address familiar, but not intended for me. Opening it, my pulse quickened. Lines of text revealed instructions meant for Michael alone. Details about transfers suggested edits to documentation, even references to bank authorizations. The lawyer had sent it by mistake, and the truth spilled out in unguarded clarity. Hope surged, tentative and fragile. The confirmation that someone else had been involved, that the plan wasn't flawless, offered leverage I hadn't expected. Yet caution held me back. Moving too soon could alert Michael, ruin the advantage, or trigger a reaction I wasn't prepared for. Michael, meanwhile, had been acting with renewed determination. Messages arrived, calls were made, each intended to obscure and intimidate. He attempted to create uncertainty to make me doubt the integrity of the documents I had collected. Every move carried a subtle threat, a challenge disguised as routine. I reviewed the email repeatedly, noting the timestamps, cross-referencing references, and marking discrepancies. A hidden pattern emerged, errors, oversights, and a misalignment of intentions that could work in my favor if handled carefully. Elena's voice echoed through my memory, reminding me to catalog everything methodically. "Robert," she said when I called, "take it slow. Every detail counts. We need a full map before any confrontation." Her guidance grounded me. The strategy became clear. I needed to confirm the evidence, understand the motives, and anticipate the moves before taking action. The accidental email was a doorway, but it required careful navigation to turn it into an advantage. Later, I moved to the bank documents and laptop spread across the counter. The staff were professional, unaware of the underlying tension that dictated my every move. Each signature, each transaction had to be reviewed and compared. Small inconsistencies emerged, providing a framework to challenge the transfers. Patience was key. I couldn't afford to act recklessly. After the bank, I walked to the nearby park, finding a bench overlooking the lake. The air didn't carry relief, but clarity began to settle. I went over every document, every email, cross-checking each entry, and preparing annotations. Michael's pressure was constant in my thoughts. His previous attempts at intimidation had left traces, mistakes that could not be ignored. Elena joined via phone, guiding me through each point. "Highlight the deviations, Robert," she instructed. "Every contradiction strengthens your position. Note them clearly and keep them separate." Following her direction, I marked the emails, screenshots, and bank records. Each element became a piece of a larger picture, a strategy forming step by step. The realization that Michael had tried to manipulate every aspect, but not perfectly, gave me a renewed sense of control. He sent another message mid-afternoon, demanding confirmation of account access. His tone implied impatience, a belief that he maintained the upper hand. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I reviewed the discrepancies, noting how each action, though confident on his part, contained weaknesses. By the time the sun was lowering, I had compiled a comprehensive list of irregularities, anomalies, and missteps. The accidental email had revealed more than just participation. It exposed patterns, assumptions, and points where intervention would be most effective. I began to visualize the sequence, how, when, and where each piece of evidence could be used to counteract the transfer. Despite the mounting pressure, a thread of calm ran through me. Observation replaced reaction. Every record, every overlooked detail strengthened the strategy. Michael's aggressive moves could no longer intimidate me. Instead, they clarified the path forward. During a brief pause, I noted the psychological play at hand. His actions were designed to make me second-guess every step, to manipulate hesitation into a concession. Yet by cataloging every detail, tracing every connection, and discussing points with Elena, I had begun to neutralize that pressure. Control was returning, measured and deliberate. The park bench offered a temporary vantage point. I reviewed the sequence of emails and transfers once more, confirming the legal irregularities and logistical errors. The pattern of oversight, combined with the lawyer's accidental disclosure, presented an opening I had been waiting for. Elena's voice cut through again as I summarized my notes aloud. "Now you can plan the confrontation," she said. "Not recklessly, but decisively. The advantage is yours if you move carefully." I absorbed her words, letting them settle. Each misstep by Michael and the lawyer was recorded, every inconsistency noted. My previous hesitation had been necessary to understand the full scope, and now a path forward was clear. The evening deepened, and I returned to the office to organize the documents further. A folder for emails, another for screenshots, and one for handwritten notes. Each entry cross-referenced each anomaly highlighted. The accidental email had shifted the balance, but action had to wait until the sequence was ready to execute. I glanced at the files again, thinking of Michael's confidence, the audacity he carried through every interaction. That same confidence, unchecked, had created weaknesses I could exploit. With Elena's counsel and careful planning, the leverage was in my hands, ready to be applied at the precise moment. The restaurant felt tense as I unfolded the folder in front of Michael and the others. The signatures, highlighted and annotated, stared back at him with unmistakable clarity. Every line matched what I had documented, and every deviation from the real signature traced a path straight to the lawyer who had colluded with him. Michael shifted slightly, as if sensing the shift, but his eyes flicked toward the other family members. The room was still the hum of conversation elsewhere, fading under the weight of what was about to unfold. I held the folder firmly, letting the evidence speak before words were needed. "Look at this," I said evenly, laying out the annotated sheets. "These signatures, do they look familiar to you?" His smirk faltered, replaced by a subtle tightening around the jaw. He tried to recover, leaning back with a casual shrug, but the attempt felt forced. The meticulous documentation, the cross-references, and the trail of emails left no room for bluffing. Elena's voice guided me through the process, calm and deliberate over the phone in a discreet earpiece. "Present the comparisons clearly, Robert. Don't comment, let them see the discrepancies." Following her instruction, I placed side by side the genuine signatures and the forgeries, highlighting the variations. Notes on dates, document numbers, and corroborating emails formed a clear narrative that could not be dismissed. Michael's attempts at confidence faltered further as the implications sank in. Who sent this?" he stammered, eyes darting toward the lawyer at the table, whose expression betrayed guilt. The very person he had relied on to shield him from exposure now became the focal point of accountability. Other family members leaned forward, curiosity mingled with shock. Murmurs spread, subtle but unmistakable, as they absorbed the evidence. Each glance toward Michael, each whispered exchange amplified the pressure, turning his casual composure into visible unease. I stayed calm, my voice steady, but each movement was calculated. The evidence had become a tool, and the truth, a weapon. It wasn't aggression, it was precise, measured action, transforming betrayal into leverage without a single word wasted. Michael attempted a response, attempting to rationalize, to frame the situation as a misunderstanding. "It's not what it looks like," he said, his tone edging into desperation. I allowed him to speak, but made no acknowledgement. The law was on my side, the documents undeniable, and his excuses sounded hollow. Every pause, every hesitation reinforced the reality that control had shifted. The lawyer who had facilitated the scheme now sat rigid, realizing exposure was imminent. Phone messages sent and deleted, misdirected instructions, and previous attempts at obfuscation all came into focus. Each error compounded the legal and ethical weight they faced. Elena continued to guide me, her instructions precise. "Make sure the annotations are visible, Robert. Highlight every step that shows coordination between him and the lawyer. Let the room see the sequence clearly." I complied, placing the annotated documents on the table so that family members could follow the timeline. Their reactions ranged from disbelief to quiet recognition, and each response applied pressure to Michael in a way that no confrontation alone could have achieved. He shifted again, eyes narrowing, searching for a flaw, a way out. But the trail was complete. Each document accounted for every email, time-stamped, every signature compared. His options diminished with every second that passed, his strategy dismantled by the evidence laid before everyone present. Silence settled heavy and deliberate. No one spoke, yet the room hummed with awareness. Family members exchanged glances, weighing the implications, recognizing that the betrayal extended beyond a single person. The lawyer's complicity had turned a private scheme into a public accountability. Michael's attempts at justification weakened. He fumbled, glanced at his phone, and his hands trembled slightly, betraying the tension he tried to conceal. Every gesture, every slip confirmed the narrative I had been assembling for weeks. I closed the folder slowly, maintaining composure, letting the finality of the evidence linger. The document's annotations and emails now formed an undeniable case that could not be ignored. Michael could no longer push forward, and the lawyer could not defend the actions without facing legal consequences. A brief pause hung between us, filled only by the subtle reactions of family members and staff in the restaurant. Their attention underscored the gravity of the situation, transforming the confrontation into a matter of undeniable reality. Finally, Michael's gaze dropped to the table. His posture collapsed slightly, a silent acknowledgement of defeat. The lawyer slumped in their chair, recognizing the exposure and the inevitable consequences. I gathered the documents, placing them back into the folder, with care ensuring every page was intact and organized. The immediate threat had been halted. The transfer process was stopped. Evidence was secured, and the leverage I had built through careful observation and documentation had been realized. Michael no longer had control over the narrative, and the lawyer's complicity had been laid bare. Actions would follow legal steps to enforce accountability, but for now the room held intense anticipation, the shift in power palpable. I slid the folder into my briefcase, standing and preparing to leave. The moment had been executed, precisely the groundwork for final resolution established. The transition from passive observation to deliberate action was complete, and the path forward had been clearly defined. Michael's posture remained, slumped eyes flicking toward family members, realizing the situation was no longer negotiable. Elena's guidance had been critical, her counsel ensuring every step remained lawful and strategic. The final meetings were over, signatures collected, and the legal process had run its course. Michael's attempt to claim control over the family assets was halted, his temporary loss of inheritance formalized, and the lawyer who had facilitated the scheme faced formal charges. Observing the consequences unfold, I felt none of the triumph I might have expected. The moment was measured deliberate and entirely procedural. Years of silence and restraint had taught me patience, but they had also left boundaries unclear, allowing overreach. That recognition settled firmly in my mind. Tolerance had been a choice. Now control was deliberate. I had learned where inaction could be exploited and how clarity of position could prevent further intrusion. Sitting in my office, reviewing the final confirmations from the bank and legal counsel, a sense of calm replaced the tension that had occupied weeks. The documentation was complete, all irregularities addressed, and the chain of accountability firmly established. Michael's influence over any decisions was nullified. There was no need for confrontation or recrimination, only recognition of the facts as they existed. The thought of reconciliation crossed briefly. Emotional forgiveness, perhaps for the sake of family dynamics or mutual understanding, but practical interaction would be limited. Boundaries were defined, lines drawn. Maintaining distance was the priority. The decision was grounded in strategy as much as in principle. Returning to work as a financial advisor felt surprisingly normal. Meetings resumed, calls answered, and projects continued. The office thrived with routine, and the distractions of everyday responsibilities helped recalibrate focus. I found satisfaction in competence, in the ability to guide others without interference from the turmoil that had briefly disrupted my life. Weekends became opportunities to reconnect with activities long postponed. I strapped on a pair of skis and navigated familiar slopes, the motion clearing the mind and reinforcing personal discipline. Mountains reminded me that progress required effort, that each decision had weight, and that control could be reclaimed with precision and persistence. Hiking trails offered solitude and a chance to reflect on the sequence of actions that had brought resolution. Every step reinforced the understanding that evidence, patience, and careful execution could balance the scales without resorting to anger. Each climb symbolized a measured ascent toward restored authority. I also initiated a small scholarship program for local students interested in finance. Directing resources into education and community service created tangible outcomes, reinforcing a sense of purpose beyond familial disputes. The work was deliberate and structured, ensuring that positive influence replaced the conflict that had once dominated my attention. Checking the final account summaries and legal notifications, I confirmed all transfers had been reversed where necessary. The assets were secured investments aligned with prior intentions, and the legal record reflected the truth. Michael's temporary gain had been neutralized, leaving only a path toward accountability through the established judicial process. Calls from friends and colleagues arrived sporadically, inquiries about past events politely couched in concern. Responses were brief, factual, and measured. Transparency without dramatization ensured that the narrative remained under control and focused on procedural outcomes rather than emotional reactions. I walked through the office one last time before leaving for the day, files neatly stacked, evidence archived, emails organized. The sequence of preparation, observation, and action had completed its course. No celebration was necessary, no overt acknowledgement required. The work had been done, and the responsibility fulfilled. Outside, the city moved forward in its familiar rhythm. Streets buzzed with traffic, pedestrians moved between destinations, and the rhythm of daily life continued, undisturbed. The contrast highlighted the quiet restoration of my own life, active, engaged, but no longer threatened by manipulation or deceit. In the evening, I checked the messages from Elena. Her reassurance, professional and pragmatic, reinforced that the process had been handled correctly. Together, we had ensured that the evidence, procedure, and accountability were aligned with law and principle. Her counsel had been critical in transforming uncertainty into action. Packing my briefcase, I felt a controlled satisfaction. Not triumph, not vengeance, but completion. The tools, the strategy, and the evidence had been applied, and the necessary consequences had been enforced. Michael's temporary claim was halted, the lawyer held accountable, and the family dynamic returned to a state where boundaries were respected and enforced. Later, driving home, I thought about the coming weeks. Work commitments awaited, projects required attention, and personal routines needed to resume. There was a sense of renewal, a focus on stability and growth rather than conflict. The transition from reactive tension to proactive management had been achieved. In the following days, routines solidified. Meetings, calls, and mentoring sessions filled the calendar. Outdoor activities provided clarity, and the scholarship program progressed. Life moved forward, balanced and anchored in a restored sense of authority and control. The final legal documents rested in a secure drawer, reminders of what had transpired, yet no longer active threats. The responsibility had been executed, the situation resolved, and the opportunity to live without the pressure of overreach reclaimed. I closed the office door behind me, stepping into the afternoon air, and walked toward the trails that had become a place for thought and reflection. Every step carried a measured awareness, a reminder that boundaries had to be maintained, action had to be deliberate, and control over my life was once again firmly in my hands.